Let's give a big startup grind welcome for George Zachary from Charles River Ventures.
That was very nice of everyone. Thank you.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. We like to, as we start with these kinds of interviews, we like to just get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us about your parents and your family and where you grew up.
Well, it's a different story, but it's not really different than any other person on the planet. My family's from a small town in Greece that's called Mikro Chorio, which means small town. And the town across the valley is called Megalo Chorio, which means big town. And it's a village of about 120 people. In the village, we've never basically believed that the government of Athens is a legitimate government, so it's been a fairly unruled area, is a good way of putting it.
Sure.
So that being from that part of Greece, my family has really shaped my views. For example, I've never voted in a U.S. election because I don't believe in the governmental system in the U.S., and I never have.
Huh.
We can talk more about that later.
That would be interesting.
But my parents came to the United States in 1950. This is like my big fat Greek wedding kind of a story. My grandfathers had a restaurant together.
Okay.
My parents' marriage was
in Brooklyn, in New York, or where was it?
In Greece.
In Greece, okay.
And my parents' marriage was fairly arranged, like heavily pushed. And they came to the U.S. because my dad fought in the Greek Civil War in the special forces in Greece.
Wow.
Against the communists there. And I asked my dad, what was special forces in Greece? And he said, we had bullets, the other guys had rocks. But the village my family's from, most of the people have died from heart disease or starvation or war. And it's kind of a place where you survive, but it's a kind of place where everyone in the village gets together every day, just like we're all getting here together, and everyone has a great time. So they have no concept of what I do or anything there. So that's a little bit where I'm from. My parents moved to New York. I was born there in Queens. I learned to play stickball there and not get beat up by gangs. And my dad was an electrician. And we were a lower middle class family, nothing extreme, but my dad worked to put food on the table, and I had two older sisters, and I was born when my parents were 40, and I actually think that it was pretty formative for me. Huh. I was born when my parents couldn't keep up with me, so I had to start inventing things in my head to keep myself happy and interested. And so there was a bit of underlying chaos in my family about that time, and that, I believe, underlying chaos encourages people who are young to either explode or learn how to manage the chaos. And when you learn how to manage the chaos, it becomes a self-replicating form of stimulus and feedback to be successful that you have to manage so that you don't just blow up sooner or later. So those are the formative things.
And what was the expectation in your home? Was there any expectation of what you would become, who you would be, or what you would go on to do? Or was it, as you were coming out of high school, did your dad expect you to be an electrician? Did he expect you to be a lawyer? What was the plan for you? Or what did you expect to be?
In 1977, when I was 12, I walked into a computer store started by a 39-year-old Polish immigrant. And I kept walking in there. This is at the end of 7th grade, and he gave me a job unboxing and putting computers together, and then basically loading operating systems. And the next thing I knew, two friends of mine and I were hacking a bunch and calling the police to friends' houses by hacking the phone system and doing other things like that. So that got me interested in computing, I'll put it that way, when technology was called computing. I'm from the era of people who call it computing. So that's kind of how I got started, and that's what I did. I had a small software development company, me and my two friends, when we were 12, 13, and 14, writing code. That was all machine language code. And then I went to MIT, and in the middle of MIT, I discovered I didn't want to write compilers for a living. I decided I wanted to work on products, and that coincided when I got recruited to work at Apple in 1986 on basically applications engineering for what was to become the Mac II. Because I worked on some multitasking OS stuff at MIT.
Yeah.
In 84, 85.
And that was your first job out of college, was to Apple, or?
It was while I was in college, yeah.
While you were in college. Yeah. And so tell us some of the things that you learned in those early days at Apple. What did you interact with any of the guys that we would be familiar with today, or was the company was that in the Scully years, or Scully came what, in 87?
Scully had just started right before I got there.
Okay.
There was Jean-Louis Gasset,
Okay.
who worked for Scully. There was Wayne Dyer. There was a bunch of exceptionally smart, driven people there. But you could feel this vacuum of where Steve Jobs was. And I had a great time working there. It was a lot of fun. It was, as a 20-year-old person in college, it was like fantastic because like someone was paying me money to do things I like to do.
Yeah.
Seemed pretty awesome.
And tell us where you went coming out of Apple. Where did you go next?
Well, when I was at MIT, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I graduated. I did consulting for about a year afterwards, management consulting, which is basically pick any two data points and draw a trend, and you can understand something. Now I'm in venture capital, which is take any one data point, and that's a trend. So I did management consulting for a year, and I kind of hated it. It was really boring. Everyone had to wear a jacket and tie, and we had to put together these PowerPoints to help companies restructure themselves. It was intellectually interesting, but what I found was that we were basically being used as a political tool by other divisions to hammer other divisions. So we really weren't creating anything. We were just moving money around.
Yeah.
So I quit. I bought a '63 Ford Thunderbird convertible. I planned for a 3-day trip to come out here. Unfortunately, it took 23 days because my car broke down many times. And I got here February 17th, 1989. And
what do you remember? You remember that date pretty well. Is it?
I remember it very well because it was a very long trip across the country with a lot of very funny things that happened.
Was it the basis of some movie where, dude, where's my car? Or did it turn into you didn't write a book about it or anything?
I didn't write a book about it. It's comical looking back on it, but it wasn't so much fun going through it. Like, you know, my roof flying off my car and being snowed on.
It's like Tommy Boy, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So then I came out here. I looked for a startup to join or start something. I joined my friend's startup.
Okay.
That was called Cat Software. And long story short, we ended up being acquired by a company called SunGard about a year and a half after I got there.
Okay.
So that worked out pretty well, pretty fast. And I thought everything was that easy, which was a big learning lesson. And the next thing I did is I joined my friend's startup, another friend of mine, a guy named Jaron Lanier, who coined the term virtual reality. I joined VPL where we coined that term. And I said, this is awesome. We're going to do virtual reality. And then VR was this huge wave. This is down on 656 Bear Island in Redwood City.
Wow.
And the thing that I discovered is we had a lot of really smart people from MIT there, but if you asked everyone what we did as a company, everyone gave you a completely different answer, which is a really bad sign. It means that there's no one understands what the focus is. We were backed by a venture investor, Thomson Ventures in France. Unfortunately, the guy who was on our board was state appointed. And the first board meeting, this is before we even shipped anything or actually even built anything, asked us what the gross margin was. And I told what the margin was. I said, well, we haven't shipped anything, so it's either zero or infinity. And he really didn't think that was funny. And that was, and that was the beginning of a really bad relationship. VPL culminated in that we raised about $3 or $4 million from Thomson. We shipped some pretty interesting technology. We sold off parts of the company to other things that actually became Macromedia, a 3D modeler.
Oh, really?
But then we lost all of our money. I was broke. I worked there for a year. I lost all the money I made in Cats. I had to go on unemployment. I had negative money. That was a really bad experience. And I have to tell you, that experience, Thomson Ventures got their money back. But a usual thing that most people are at least halfway decent as venture investors do is they create what's called a carve-out. And a carve-out is you take a little bit of the acquisition price and you give it to the team. And we actually haven't even been paid for a year. So
wow.
We were actually due some salary. But
living together, I mean, was it just, how did you even, you have side jobs, or how did you make?
No, I spent all the money I'd made in Cats to zero.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. So that was about a year of eating pasta out of a box uncooked because that's way faster than cooking it.
Sure.
But as I was telling one of my mentors today, I was incredibly happy. I was doing things that I loved with people that I really liked. And even though I didn't have a lot of material things, I felt pretty happy. And I'll always remember that. I was also terrified because I was completely broke, which was not a good feeling at all. So to recover, I got recruited to Silicon Graphics to run a secret project which became the Nintendo 64. And that's because at VPL we worked on 3D graphics. And that was probably the high point of my operating career. I needed to rebuild not just my balance sheet personally, but I needed to rebuild my psyche. Because when VPL ended, it was really crushing for all of us. And when you lose and go broke and have to go on unemployment, it can really fuck with your head.
Who in here owned a Nintendo 64? Yeah. So tell us a little bit of backstory, and were you on the development side?
Yeah.
How did that product come to be, and what was the launch of that like?
I ran the group. So how many people here know who Jim Clark is? Okay, a fair amount of people. So Jim Clark was the founder of Silicon Graphics.
Yeah.
And Jim was trying to get a better job at Silicon Graphics. They kicked him out to be the chairman. And he wanted this big raise, and then he came up with this idea called the teleputer, which he was trying to get funded. He couldn't
Sounds
get it
brilliant.
Funded. Yeah. And then so he went by Nintendo and Sega and said, we can build this awesome video game system for you. Huh. And Sega said, we're not going to pay you any money to do it. Nintendo said, we have no engineering, we'll pay you money to do it. So we wound up with the contract. Jim got fired from Silicon Graphics, not a commonly known story. And he met Mark Andreessen through Jeff Troyhaft, who was an early Netscape person. Jeff ran the demo center at Silicon Graphics and gave demos to everyone. And when they kicked Jim Clark out of the company, effectively, they moved him up to be sitting next to the person that ran the demo center. And Jeff knew about Mozilla and Mark, and that's how Jim became the co-founder of Netscape, because he met Mark Andreessen that way. It was not Jim's idea, it was Mark's idea the entire time.
Sure.
So I ran the Nintendo.
Well, that's not actually, it's a lot of times they say it the other way around, right? I mean,
That was really Mark's idea.
Yeah.
And Jim was the megaphone, I'll put it that way. So running the Nintendo 64, it was, we were a 50-person skunkworks team that expanded to about 100. We put $300 million of profit in SGI's bank account. There was a lot of funny stories. What kind of funny story do you want?
Just one that would make headlines.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. We don't have headlines. No, I don't know. Tell us. Was it ever in jeopardy? Was it ever in jeopardy of never happening? Was it, did you know it was going to be a huge success? It ended up selling about.
We knew if we could build it, it would be a huge success.
Yeah.
There's a couple interesting things. Number one, our architect of the graphics chip was this guy named Tim Van Hook. Tim was never trained in electrical engineering, but designed the graphics processing unit of the Nintendo 64.
Wow.
He was a sculptor. Tim was brilliant. He designed it. We built it out, and it ran the first time.
Wow.
That was amazing. Another amazing thing is I spent time with Miyamoto. Miyamoto built all of Nintendo's big games. He's one of the most famous game designers.
Mario,
Zelda, Donkey Kong.
We play all those games.
Yeah, and I remember asking him, like, where do you get your inspiration to play games? And I thought it was going to be some, like, incredibly elegant theory. And now that I'm saying it, it's an incredibly elegant but simple theory. I asked him this, and he looked at me. He says, were you ever a kid? And I said, yeah. And he said, where did you grow up? I said, New York City. And he said, well, what did you do for fun? I was like, well, we used to like play hide and go seek and make like walls into things and use parts of the curb for things. He goes, that's what I do. He says, I just build an environment and I spend months moving around and running around in it, and whatever pops into my head, I build that. That was his entire process of building all those games that won. There was no pre-computed theory. There was no market research studies that because there was Farmville, there should be Farmville 2.0. There was none of that. It was just him thinking as a pure, innocent child. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that he had spent time in like his grandparents' home or something, and as a kid doing that exact thing, or something like that, and it was kind of almost reminiscent of like Jack Dorsey talking about Twitter and how he used to walk around the cities. It's almost like he was born to do what he did because from a little kid.
I find that usually the most interesting ideas are natural extensions of that person's personality, issues, psychological issues, things that they're interested in. It becomes coherent with who they are. And when I hear a founder talking about an idea, I can get a sense, wow, that's that person. It's not just, you know, a market research study says 4 out of 5 people want toothpaste that has a web browser. It's not like that.
Right. It's more than that, though, isn't it? It's more than 2 out of 4.
Well, yeah, it's like 5 out of 6.
Well, so tell us.
So that was the Nintendo experience.
Yeah, really
At
cool.
the end of it, I started building a multiplayer video game company in 1993, 94. At the same time, interestingly, Jim Clark was, and Jim and I kind of talked a little bit, and then we never worked on it together. I went out to go get it funded, and that was my first exposure to venture people. And I started working this at the same time I was doing N64 stuff, so I basically had no free time. And I figured out there was way too much latency on the internet to do it. This is 1994, when a good connection was 256 kilobits.
It was going to be like an online multiplayer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a couple of venture firms that were hosting me, and I told them, I don't want to do this. This is not going to work. And they said, well, okay. Do you ever think about being a venture capitalist? I'm like, no. Like, what do you do? And they said, well, what do you think it's about? I'm like, well, look, I don't shave every day. I don't play golf or tennis. I don't own
a yacht.
I don't do that. And I said, I like working with teams of people and product. And then a person who's one of my mentors now said, you know, the way to think about it is the company is your product. And something clicked in me, and my gut said, I should do this. And my brain said, I should absolutely not do this because I know nothing about this. And that's how I got involved in venture. It was not some pre-computed strategical move on my part to become a venture capitalist. I never had a desire to become a venture capitalist. I never had a dream. I never had an intention. It was never something I'd ever remotely thought about, ever. And when I get invited to speak at business schools, I tell that story, and then MBAs will come up and talk to me. They said, so what did you do? And I was like, I was just in the right place at the right time doing things that I really loved.
Yeah.
That's all I did. So I guess it was a good stroke of fortune. It actually turned out to be a really good stroke of fortune. But within 3 months, I decided to listen to my gut, which was a really good thing to do, and I accepted. I was terrified that I didn't know how to do it. All these people said, you'll be really good at doing this, and I had no idea why they said that. And sometimes I still have no idea why people say that, actually. And I decided to do it. And that was December of 1995, so 17 years ago. And that was the beginning of my venture career. I was also the co-founder of Shutterfly in 1999 with Jim Clark, Dan Baum, and Eva Manolis. Dan and Eva and I worked together at SGI. And Dan was a photographer and came up with a cool new image processing algorithm. And he showed up in my office another February in 1999 and said, I have this cool new image processing algorithm, and you know all the Japanese people, because of Nintendo, will they license my algorithm? And I was like, no, they will just steal it. and so we just started brainstorming about what to do with it. And the algorithm was to make prints look really good on laser printer paper, to look like Kodachrome. And at that point, I used to go to the post office a lot and go take prints that I'd picked up at Safeway and send them to my family in Greece. And the same week I was doing that was the same time I was talking to Dan. I figured out, wait a second, I just read an article that there's these new digital cameras. This would be way cooler than ever going to the post office.
Send it online,
just a
email
bunch
it
of
online.
stuff clicked in our head, and we said we should start a company that we deliver prints. And almost everyone told us it was the stupidest thing ever, that photo sharing was the only way forward. But
photo sharing wasn't as hot then as it is now?
No, it was hot, but there was no business model then.
Yeah. When was photo sharing not hot? Was it like in late 80s or the 60s? Photo sharing's always been hot, I guess.
Well, not when the people didn't have internet bandwidth.
Okay.
The only photo sharing that occurred then was kind of the adult photo sharing.
Okay.
in the
Peter
mid-90s.
knows about that. Yeah, he's familiar with that industry.
So
wake up, Peter.
So that was, Shutterfly, with amazing stories of almost dying and winning multiple times of work. I mean, we had crazy things happen in Shutterfly, and it's a $400 million a year revenue company now.
Billion market cap, right? Billion plus.
Yeah, it's a billion and a half, and I learned some tremendous lessons there. We can talk about that if that's of interest to anyone.
Well, one thing that's interesting about it to me is that it seems like I was there today, and it seems like the original vision for Shutterfly is almost exactly the same as what the product is today.
Yeah.
And I,
that's the good news and the bad news.
Well, yeah, okay, but it's very profitable, and it's like
it's
you're
pretty
saying.
Profitable.
You're saying that photo sharing. It didn't have a business model at the time, but you all figured it out. So was it getting revenue from day one? Was it,
Yes.
what was that product?
We were.
Yeah.
So the first thing, the way that I figured out what to do with Dan was, I was thinking about like photos, and the thing that popped into my head is, I always remember my mom inviting her relatives over in New York to come look at photos of the family, and how important that was to my mom and to everyone else in the family. And I said, this is not a product for the drunk dudes market. This is for the busy moms with kids market, because there's real emotional value.
Yeah.
So we focused on moms. I recruited a female CEO, Jane Spiegelman. I cold called her out of Macy's in Circuit City and recruited her. And then we started the company. And then I worked with Jim. And I had probably the most exciting and most horrific experience I've ever working with anyone in working with Jim. And I've talked with Andersen a lot about working with Jim, and we've had very parallel experiences. But Jim is a very powerful person who is effectively ruled by fear. And what I've discovered is that fear is probably the most destructive element you can have in any co-founder, board member, or investor. It just nukes and freezes the company. Nothing grows from fear. Nothing in the world grows from fear. And that fear that Jim injected into the company has kept the company in stasis without any real significant product innovation since 2004 or 3.
Wow.
And I can tell you some funny stories about
Please.
Jim.
This is a funny story environment. It's all safe here. No one's
yeah.
tweeting except the
Well,
hashtag
if
is
they
startup
want
grind.
to, if they want to, that's fine with me too. I don't have any
please.
secrets here. Okay, where to start with Jim? Well, oh boy. I would say.
Was there ever a point where you were in a corner of a room, rocking, crying, fetal
there
position,
was
moments
worse,
like that?
actually.
Let's go through that one.
So in the middle of one board meeting, I told Dan and Eva and Jim we should experiment and do some like video sharing where people can upload videos. And Jim looked at me and says, "You are a fucking idiot." And I said, "What?" He's like, "We're about to run out of money. You want to buy more EMC storage, Sun servers? You're a fucking idiot. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Jim, I just have a feeling that people are going to want to do this video share videos too." And he's like, "No one is going to share videos. No one. You have no clue of what you're talking about." So Dan said, "Yeah, I really want to do it." And Jim stands up and says, "Look, if you guys want to do this, I will walk away from the board and never claim any association with you and tell everyone that I have nothing to do with this company."
Jeez.
So that was the beginning of the conversation. No, that wasn't all. So then Jim says, "Follow me." So the board meeting kind of takes a break. I follow Jim. He walks into the bathroom. This is a true story.
And brings you all in there.
No, he brings me in there. So Jim has the stall open doing the number 2 while yelling at me while employers are walking in. And I'll never really forget employees walking in seeing Jim Clark with his pants to his ankles making strange grunting noises while yelling at me. That was a memorable experience. And
if only you had that video sharing site live, you could have gone viral with it.
Well, so the ironic part about it is Jim's daughter got divorced, and she started dating a guy named Chad Hurley. And Chad Hurley told a little bit of his video sharing idea to Jim, and Jim says, "There's another fucking idiot like you that wants to do this video sharing thing." And he's a smart guy, but he's dating my daughter, and I don't want to fund video sharing. It's stupid. So Chad started YouTube, and Jim never said anything about it to me after that.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I have hundreds of Jim Clark stories, and that's probably the most.
Any more from the stalls of the?
No, that's the only stall one. But of course, Jim did weird things like take pictures of himself with people who get paid to give you massages. I guess that's a politically correct
The John Travolta massage,
yes,
as we call it.
And had them actually go through the Shutterfly processing line where actually employees put them in the envelopes. And all the employees knew that our chairman of the board and co-investor was doing things that weren't.
Well, he's using his own product. I mean, can you fault the guy for that?
No, I don't fault him. But that was Shutterfly. We were incredibly up and down. And I got to know James Joaquin, who was the co-founder of Ophoto.
Okay, yeah.
And the bizarre thing is we both thought we had spies in each other's companies because we were announcing similar things at the same time. And it turns out that we didn't. It's just when there's a good idea, I think people tend to pick up on it and to follow it. And ideas are kind of a product of human society and people. They're not just an invention of one person. So we were both reacting to similar things out in the environment. And unfortunately, Photo was acquired by Kodak. And Jim actually, I was really mad at Jim for years because Dan Karp, who was the CEO of Kodak, was going to buy us for $150 million. And he told Jim, he was going to call Jim and give him the final offer. So a week goes by. I said, Jim, did Karp call you? And he goes, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. And I said, what happened? He says, well, he said that it's only worth 75, so I told him to fuck off, and I hung up on him. And I said, why didn't you tell me? He goes, because I don't have to.
Wow.
So that's like not...
Wow.
Now, the ironic thing is they bought Photo, they destroyed Photo. They destroyed it, and we just bought all of Photo back from them for $27 million.
Wow.
And you know that the fundamental mistake of Kodak is they forgot what they really do, which is they were supposed to provide the human element of delivering emotions and memories. Instead, they thought they were a chemical company. And that's the unraveling of a company, is when they forget why they really exist.
On this note of Jim, let's talk about, you know, the kind of the ideal founder, these founders that you look for, which I'm assuming are not in his model. But, you know, if you could build a bear founder, you know, talk to us a little bit about what does this person, do they have a certain look? Do they, you know, are they roughly a certain age? Let's just walk through the different characteristics of this person. First of all, you know, is it a white male, 22 to 27, single? Do those things matter? What is it, or not?
Well, single is good because usually means there's some level of psychological disturbance.
Sure.
Which means they'll spend all
Most
their time
of
on
our
the
audience
company.
is single.
Yes,
so.
I understand that. I was single until for a long time as well. What I look for is someone who has a psychological need to win. I don't mean a want to win. I mean a all-consuming, almost destructive need to win. These are the people that drive things further and faster and cannot stop working. What I've discovered is that with most of those people, they usually come from a household where one parent was super supportive and the other parent was volatile or missing. So they learn to manage chaos when they're young. It's a very common element I've seen in some of the best founders. The other thing I look for is a high degree of intelligence, and I don't mean like per an IQ test, but they have a richness of thought about the area they're working on where they can explain it very quickly and simply. It's not like a 5,000 word description of what the company does. And I keep seeing this recurring pattern of the most powerful founders have this combination.
And do they have that ability to define their product in that way at the very earliest stage? Or is that so have they spent all this time thinking about it pre-product, or is that something that they kind of grow into where?
It's both. So I'll use two very opposite examples. One who's a close personal friend of mine, Elon Musk, and the other person who had the pleasure in backing an Odeo Twitter, which was Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
I met Elon in January of 1996. My partners and I funded him to build Zip2, which was Yelp 20 years ago. And we were luckily acquired. Elon made a bunch of money that way. Unfortunately, I just went to his co-founder's funeral 2 weeks ago, who died prematurely at 51.
Wow.
Which was very sad. And when I met Elon, I knew from the second I met him that this was a guy who was driven. He was driven for hugeness, and he was exceptionally bright. It just like radiated brightness and intensity to me. And I felt it. And we became friends, and Zip2 had a good outcome. But I think the most interesting thing is like he started X.com, which I didn't back, which was a mistake. And they merged with the Confinity guys.
Why not? Why didn't
PayPal.
you back that?
I didn't believe that an internet-only bank was going to work. That was Elon's idea. And it was called X.com because he had no idea what he was doing, and he started a shell company to avoid paying short-term taxes.
Sure.
That's why it's called X.com. And I saw amazing things in Elon, like incredible risk-taking, but what I saw in him was like just a ridiculous drive to win. And I think this time I saw it the most was about 10 years ago. I hadn't seen Elon for a while. I called him up, and he says, I just got out of the hospital. I almost died from meningitis and malaria. I was like, are you kidding me? He says, no, I'm serious. He goes, but I'm doing something new. I'm like, okay. Like what? He goes, let's meet for coffee. So we met for coffee on University Ave in Palo Alto. I remember it clear as day. And he goes, I have some ideas about space. And I was thinking, uh-oh. And so I'm paraphrasing the discussion, but Elon basically said, I'm thinking about launching mice to Mars. Do you think that's crazy? And I said, do they come back? And he said, no. And I said, yes, that is crazy. But we had to back up, and I asked Elon, like, why do you want to do this? He goes, I want to be the first person to do interstellar travel. I have to save humanity, and the way I'm going to save them is by making us a multiplanetary species. So unlike some of our friends who are into saving the Earth and avoiding global warming, I'm not focused on that. I'm not focused on how can we live on other planets. And he had an intensity of drive about that, but he had no idea of what the business was going to be or the product. And then over a period, and like he experimented, like going to Russia to buy a former nuclear missile to use it to launch mice.
Sure.
But underneath it, he had this drive and he had a vision of what he wanted. It was driven by passion. It was not driven by math or some kind of calculus.
Or money.
Or money. And people thought Elon's idea was pretty nutty. And then he said, look, I'm going to do this, but he figured out the intermediate product, which is a business to do to do satellite launch.
Yeah.
Before you can do interstellar travel, you got to do something before that.
Sure.
Because why do you do interstellar travel? So he started to do satellite launch, and then he basically, through just incredible intensity, built up a great company in SpaceX.
Yeah.
And I am like, I cannot believe what he's done in 10 years from a scratch no idea. He was not a rocket person. He knew nothing about the space business.
He's just a brilliant guy.
He's a brilliant guy.
He's Iron
very
Man.
intense.
I mean, come on.
What?
He's Iron Man, right? No.
Yeah, I know him as Elon, so it's like, I just know him as a person. So,
Right.
Iron Man.
Well,
you know, and then there's Jack on the other side. Jack is.
Well, can I ask you about just something on Elon? Do you think were his motivations of X.com now that was his, that was really his first big product. Was he motivated more by money on that, and then he had made money, so he was less concerned, or was he just never, are these guys who start these, that are like, was he like Zuck, where he just like,
He thought he hated running errands and. Hated running errands because he had $1 million McLaren F1,
sure.
which was like 1/5 of all the money he had left after he had spent it on X.com. Driving it around Palo Alto with bird poop on it, going to Safeway to pick up
crashed
groceries.
it, didn't he?
He crashed it with Peter Thiel in the car, mistakenly. And he's like, people waste so much time doing errands. So he said there should be an internet-only bank, because why do I want to go to a bank and talk to people? And that's where his idea came from. And I said, Elon, I think most people want to feel the security that there's a bank. So my partners, I didn't back him, and that was a mistake. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So going on to Jack and his vision.
Yeah. So Jack came out of Odeo, which was started by Noah Glass, who recruited Evan Williams to be the co-founder. Jack was fairly unknown in Odeo.
Yeah.
And when the whole company was blowing up, Evan decided to start hacking days internally, and Jack
because the product wasn't doing that great, or they saw Apple.
No, it was a disaster.
Like,
Apple announced podcasting.
Yeah.
Everyone in the company was asking me to fire other parts of the company and make them the CEO. It was a complete disaster, and Reel and Yahoo wanted to buy the company for $15 million. And Yahoo actually decided no, and then Evan said, I really don't want to go work for Reel, so can you not push me to take this offer? And I told him, that's cool, don't take the offer.
Wow.
I don't want to send you to jail. So Evan felt guilty and bought back everyone's stock. He did not know that Twitter was going to be successful. There was no conspiracy theory there.
Yeah.
We had like 6,000 users at the time. He bought everyone back, and he paid everyone out of his own pocket, including the comment. That was easier for him than firing other people. And he just thought it was the right thing to do. And Jack, I was in the room when Jack was convincing Evan that it was a good idea, that TWTTR, there was something to it. And half of me said it was a great idea, and the other half of me was scared from the situation at Odeo, where basically people didn't show up for work. I could walk into the office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in South Park, and no one would be there.
Yeah.
And I was thinking,
but
what
were they
do I do?
working? I mean, were they at home working, or were they?
I don't know if anyone was working.
Yeah.
And Noah was fanatical about Twitter and thought it was going to be the biggest thing ever. And Evan was a convert to it. It wasn't his original idea. It was Jack's idea and Noah. ended up not being part of Twitter when Evan ended up making it into a company.
Right.
And he's kind of an unsung hero, as was another guy named Fabian in Germany who was an engineer. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And Jack was a fairly mild-mannered guy. I mean, what you see now is like a 1,000x pumped-up version of Jack. He was not.
He's like a senior engineer, wasn't he? I mean, he didn't have a management. He wasn't a senior.
No.
He wasn't the CTO. He wasn't the chief product guy or anything.
Yeah, he was not any of those things.
Yeah.
But it was his idea, and it was something he believed in, and he was doing it. And he built it on a hacking day, and that's how it got started.
And you're one of the few investors that actually was then from Odeo into the new round of Twitter.
Yeah.
Why? How were you able to do that? What? Why did that happen?
Evan invited me to. I mean, I owned at one point 28% of Odeo, and then Evan bought all of us back, and he invited me to invest about $1 million in Twitter when it was a $25 million valuation. We didn't invest the full amount, but we invested a good amount of it.
Yeah.
A small amount, actually. And actually, I had Evan come and present to my partners, and it was not like a robust presentation, I'll put it that way. The slides were, well, this is Twitter. People tweet. People all around the world are tweeting. People tweet about all different things. In the future, we will do groups. And which still hasn't happened.
Was this happening?
Which still has not happened.
Were people actually tweeting around the world, or this was?
Yeah, they were.
They were. It had gotten some traction.
This wasn't at the time of the spin out. This is the time when Evan
Series
was raising
A or
money.
Something. Yeah.
This was about South by Southwest time.
Okay.
And the person who caught hold of it, and I give him a ton of credit, the only venture person that got it was Fred Wilson from Union Square. The only person, and he was fanatical about it. I offered Evan a $12.5 million post-money valuation. Evan basically got double that from Fred. So hats off to Fred. He really understood it and was comfortable paying a higher price, which I give him credit for. And that's the kind of investor you want. You want people who believe in the product and don't question you as founders or anything. So I believe Evan made the right choice. It cost me about $1 billion for being second choice, but it's the right thing to do for the company. And that's the most important thing in the long run.
Yeah.
It still hurts not having
I mean, it's just $1 billion. What does it matter?
Yeah.
It's just
But
money.
That's right. That is.
There's a lot of things you could get with it, but.
There's a lot of things I could get with it, but I have almost everything I need, so I'm good.
There you go. How did you originally meet those guys, even to invest in Odeo?
I met them through James Hong. So this is a really good question. James was the founder of Hot or Not.
Yep.
The original dating site.
Sure.
And James is a phenomenal guy. I met James through Philip Kaplan.
Did you invest? You didn't invest in Hot or Not.
No, they weren't looking to raise money.
Yeah, okay.
I met James through Philip Kaplan. I met Philip Kaplan through Jonathan Abrams. I met Jonathan Abrams in like 1996, 97 when he moved out here and worked at Netscape. So that was like the connection of people, and it was just like following.
Jonathan Abrams is the Friendster founder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that I have to now say these things because it doesn't feel like that much time has passed. So that's how I got to Evan. It wasn't a deterministic thing. It was just meeting people and
all relationship based. It sounds
relationship based, but not the relationship based of like salesman relationship based. Like, hey, I want to be your friend. Let's have lunch. I want to be your friend. It was just like, they're cool, they're fun. So let's go party and have fun. And so it was an organic process. It wasn't a mechanical money-seeking process. I'll put it that way.
How has that changed today? I mean, in terms of you getting deals and finding companies that Charles River Ventures wants to invest in. Has that process changed, or is it still the same? It's
still the same.
Is it Jack Dorsey introducing you to somebody, or Elon introducing you to somebody?
It's still the same, but it's not all the companies I funded have gone through that process. Some people just send me something in the email, and I say, that's an awesome idea. I love that. That's very rare. In my 17 years of doing this, I've talked to or emailed or looked at least 20,000 companies.
Wow.
At least. It was 15,000 in my database that I carried up until 2004 or 5. So.
What do you mean your database? What is that?
I kept a track of every time I emailed someone and the name of the company, because in the 90s, people used to send me FedExes of their business plans. So they would, like no one emailed business plans. And that's when you emailed a business plan. Or a FedEx, it was like
40 pages or something.
40?
I don't know. I've never written one.
40, they were like this. And it was like, yeah, there were some very funny ones. And then we had to like ship them back. And at that time, no one could ever conceive that you would send a PowerPoint deck over
Summary
email.
or something, yeah.
No, it was like this old school mating process where lawyers would introduce you to different venture people, and there was no venture firms didn't have websites when I got started in the business. Oh my God, it can't be that long ago, but it is. It was very different. Right now, so much of the advantages move for the founders, which is good, because founders are the ones who produce innovation. Capital does not. Capital is only a fuel. That's all capital is. It's fuel. And then the people attached to that fuel can be supporters. They can be advisors. But the basic idea and the basic founders are the raw material of the company. The capital does not produce innovation. And what I find is in the periods of the biggest bubbly periods, all venture firms are like doing crazy marketing. We add more value than they add value. So one of the things I've learned from a couple of my mentors who've been in the business for 40 years now is they said, you know, when I was doing this in the 70s and 80s, you know what the value add was? I was like, what? Showing up with the money and not being a jerk. And, you know, I think having some domain knowledge can be helpful, but anyway, I'm sorry to go off on a tangent there.
No, that's
but
great.
that was an indicator of a bubble period is always when venture firms are out marketing because you're trying to differentiate your form of capital. Yeah. Right? And there was a bit of a peak of that about a year ago. Yeah. And it still continues.
Yeah, I mean, Andreessen Horowitz has 40 people on staff doing PR. I'm exaggerating, but they have a huge marketing and PR group, and there are other firms that have, you know, these huge groups of funneling in engineers and other things like that. So, do you think that gives them an advantage, or does it not? I mean, does it matter?
I think the advantage is short-term. Gives who an advantage? The venture firm,
founders.
Or the founders.
Well, does it give the venture firm an advantage to get the deal?
My firm CRV did this with 70 people in 2000.
Yeah.
We found the first 2 years it was great at attracting founders, but what we found then was that the founders kind of used it marginally, and then they actually didn't really find it useful. So we stopped doing it. We had to kind of untangle the whole thing. Yeah. You know, you can see precedents in the movie business, which is usually the most successful producers, which are analogous to venture capitalists, are not people that staff your entire movie. They know the right resources for that movie, but they don't have those resources internally to help you make that movie. Interesting. And I think the Andreessen Horowitz experiment is a very good one. It's funny, as I was walking here, Andreessen was emailing me about something he wants to do with me, and so now
what was that?
Like
was it anything interesting? Or?
It's very interesting, but I can't say what it is yet.
Well, no one's listening.
But I will hopefully be able to.
Hashtag startup grind.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But I credit Mark and Ben for doing what they're doing because they are attempting to disrupt the rest of the venture business, and it's a great experiment. They're running it about as well as you can, but in 5 or 6 years we'll know how it works out. So,
I'd love to talk to you about. I'd love to talk to you kind of as we did with Odeo. Tell us a little bit about, you know, the whole how Genie and
Yammer.
Eventually Yammer folded out of that, and how did you take us to the very beginning? How did you meet David Sachs? Where was that relationship started, and why did you originally invest in him?
When Elon was flying up here in his L-38 Czechoslovakian jet that he had bought for $5 million that still had Russian insignia on it while eBay was being acquired by, PayPal was being acquired by eBay. Yeah. Elon says, you really have to meet David Sachs. And I said, who is he? He goes, he's the smartest guy at PayPal. Without David, we would not have been successful. Wow. I assure you. And I said, I better meet David Sachs. So I met David, and David was very smart, I could tell from the beginning, and Dave and I were friends for a long time. We used to stay at each other's houses. Another friend of mine is a guy named Jeff Skoll who started a movie production company, which is called Participant Productions, which has produced a lot of fantastic movies, The Help, Contagion, Hurt Locker, which he started as a joke, actually, from some brainstorming one night.
Hurt Locker?
No, the Participant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Syriana, North Country.
Wow.
Inconvenient Truth, actually. So when I look back on this, so Jeff and I were friends. We met by speaking on a panel in 1996, and I just saw him last night for drinks, and Elon and I became friends, so David became friends with us. We thought about having David be part of participant productions with us, but David wanted to do his own thing, and Peter Thiel wanted to give David his own money to do it, which is, interesting kind of rivalry going on.
Yeah.
And David produced Thank You for Smoking, which was a great movie, and then David did it and said, it was a fun movie, but Hollywood kind of sucks because you have to work really hard to make no money, and everyone's really difficult. And I have another internet idea that I want to do. And I said, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I've been talking to Peter a bunch, Thiel, and I think Facebook is a great idea for kids, but I think a family social network will be awesome. I said, I thought the same thing, something similar when we were doing Shutterfly, because all the photos were between people and families. And David said, I'm going to do this thing called Genie. So that's how Genie started. In the middle of Genie, David was not watching what was happening with Twitter, and he's like, what the hell are those guys doing there? The site's always down. And responding to a Twitter down problem. That goes to the fire department. And they decided to make a mock version of Twitter internally for engineers at Genie to build code faster. And it worked really well internally, like they were way more productive. And David decided, we should spin this out as a company. And that was about 4.5 years ago. So we spun Yammer out of Genie.
Wow.
And
Disrupt, right? They launched it.
we launched
TechCrunch
Disrupt.
50.
We spun it out legally before that.
Okay.
We were working on it in the spring of 2008.
Okay, wow.
And David did a fantastic job driving it. David is a brilliant product guy, a master strategist, master, and he did a great job scaling the company. I tell you, out of all of my years in venture, it was the most exciting success because David and I were friends.
Yeah.
So it's great to see a friend of yours succeed.
Yeah.
And to see him feel successful. And what I do, that's besides making a lot of money, the best part is seeing people you really like make money and feel successful. That's a great thing.
It's really cool. Talk to us a little bit about intuition. And this is something that, as a founder, I have thought hours and hours about this. When a founder, tell us about why intuition is important to you. Why should founders follow their intuition?
Because what else do you really have in life? That's why. I've learned through my successes in life and failures, both personally and professionally, that listening to my gut is the right thing to do for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But it does mean that that's what I should follow. That's my passion. And that's what I've done. And when I've done that, it's worked well. When I've followed my brain but not my heart, it's resulted in disaster and failure every time. When I've made decisions out of fear, it's resulted in disaster and fear almost every time. I've had no success from making a rational decision or a decision based on fear. None. It's all come from listening to my gut and intuition. And I actually found a fantastic mentor who's helped me listen to that more. And while I'm an MIT person, and most of my friends will understand me as an incredible reductionist, what I've discovered is that quantification, rationalization, and reductionism is a control system to manage your own emotions. And you have to look past those things into your intuition. So that's kind of what I've discovered. The other thing is kind of my own personal philosophy. I don't ascribe to any specific religion or philosophy.
Yeah.
But what I've discovered and what I believe in is that there's a positive force that everyone can react to that's inside them, and there's a negative force.
Okay.
And sometimes people call these things love and fear. I don't have labels for them. I just have a feeling. So when I feel that positive force, I follow it. That's how I make all my decisions. My investing algorithm is, do I feel more energized at the end of the meeting than I did at the beginning of the meeting? That is all it is. There is nothing more at all. And in 17 years of doing this, I've put up $1 billion of gains on $150 million invested. Wow. And the $1 billion of gains were up through about 8 to 10 companies. So it wasn't just one hit.
Yeah.
which according to my limited partners ranks me as one of the top 25 people in the world in terms of multiple in that gain.
Wow.
And so I either have like the most incredible great luck ever, and I think I do have a lot of great luck, but I do believe that there is something important to listen to in each one of us that can help us with important decisions.
And have you been wrong? Has that intuition ever, led you down the wrong path or with the wrong investment, or what percentage of the time?
Yes, I have. It for sure. It for sure has, and I try to forget those moments because it just starts to disprove part of my theory.
Smart. Well, we call that the "What would Jim Clark do?"
Yeah. Jim wouldn't act that way. But what I discovered was that I can't. If I make decisions just using my brain or using fear, it always results in something bad.
Yeah.
It always does, from being divorced, or personally, or from losing a ton of money, bad health issues. So what I've decided to follow is I'm just going to follow my intuition, and I have no idea whether it's going to work out great or right for the rest of my life, but I decided that's what's best for me. And it's not like sometimes I look at tons of companies and I just tell people, I'm sorry, I just don't feel excited. And it's not a judgment that they're not going to be successful. Like I met Mark Pincus, and I told Mark, I'm sorry, I just don't feel excited. And I'm glad I decided that, because I wouldn't have been the right investor for Zynga.
Yeah. So as a founder who's, tried to go with his gut many, many times, I've had the same advice. It's interesting because the advice I've gotten on that has been from guys who started their career at Apple in kind of a similar period where, that was kind of the culture there. It seemed like, the Steve Jobs instilled somebody to trust your gut and go with your gut. How does the problem I've had is that sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's my gut. I'm going with it. And then it turns out like,
it doesn't work out.
Man, my gut sucks, or like, maybe that wasn't my gut. Maybe that was just indigestion. How do you tell the difference between, you're making these huge decisions, right?
Yeah.
You're putting your family on the line. You're putting your career on the line. How do you know that this is actually your gut? How can you tell?
Well,
how do you figure that out?
I don't know that there's any certainty to it at all. What I do know, I have a feeling more energized. Mm-hmm. And it's not an energized like, I'm going to make $1 billion and I'm going to be immortal and control the earth. It's not that feeling of energized. It's one where, like, as kids, going back to the Miyamoto thing, you feel happy, you feel like the sense of energy and purpose, and you feel clear. Some of the best moments in your life, in everyone's life, they have those experiences. It's important to remember those and act off of those. That's what I think. And a lot of mistakes I've made by acting out of my gut have led to important things that I've had to learn to get better. And I'm not necessarily sure there's any divine purpose or anything behind it at all. I have no idea. But what I do know is that by learning through my mistakes, I've tended to get better, so I can make new mistakes. That's what I've learned. There's no science to it. There's no 64,000 variable algorithm to investing or anything.
Yeah.
If there was, I'd be doing that, or other people would be doing it.
I think you make a great point in that's the experience I've had, is that sometimes my gut didn't lead me to that, $100 million business, but it did lead me down a path where I got stronger, I got smarter, and it led to the next thing, which was better. What about following emotion? Because, following your gut like that, you're using that emotion, that can create big problems, right? If you're in a company and you're, you don't want to fire somebody because he's a good guy and he's your friend, and you just how smart is it to follow that emotional level that you have, or is there a point where it cuts off? And what do you think?
What do I think about that? Well, I've had to fire friends of mine, and it sucks. But the only thing worse was watching them sit around and fuck up the company more, and build up resentment. Which only damages your relationship more with that person. I've had some friendships and relationships end because of having to fire people, and it's horrible. It's really horrible.
Yep.
But I don't know of any other better system. I've had to fire my fair share of people who have been founders, and it's been horrible. And what I've discovered is that there's a way to do it. If you have to fire a founder, there's usually a lot of signs of it. a lot of signs. Like people in the company start sending you anonymous emails saying to fire the founder. Like people send you send you physical mail
to the venture capitalist, or as an operator. Are you talking as an operator, or as
I'm talking about an
capitalist?
Investor.
Yeah, okay.
I've gotten physical mail from people in the company saying, please fire blah, blah, blah.
Because of this?
She sucks at being CEO and is destroying the company.
Wow.
I've had management teams of company who report to the CEO, walk into my office and say, if you guys don't fire the CEO, we are all leaving.
Wow.
All of us. And it's pretty common. Inter-founder conflict is the biggest issue in a company. It's not board to founder issues. Those are the ones you hear about. The biggest issues are the ones between co-founders, where they have extreme tensions and can't work out the problems and things blow up. That's 80% of the startups I work with. It's and I don't have a solution for it. I really don't. But if you're like in the cases where there's different ways to fire someone, and you have to remember that they are a human at the end of it and never lose sight that they had dreams.
Yeah.
And I really believe in keeping people who are involved at the beginning of the company still involved in the company. I'm not a believer of fire the person and exit them out of the company unless they're doing something highly illegal, which has happened.
Yeah.
In some cases, I've had cases of having to fire people who broke the law, like the real law. I had to fire someone who was going to come and kill all the employees. We had one of those.
Should let him go.
And no, he had to go to jail because he had a trunk
Seems
full
fair.
of guns coming to kill everyone in the company.
Seems like a pretty fair way to go for that guy.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
Which company was that?
I can't say.
Okay. Let's talk about. We're going to take some questions. So if you want to ask a question, go right over here.
Yeah,
and
I
I'm gonna bring
encourage
the mic
people to
over
ask any question. I'm an open book.
I'm going to ask just one thing. I want to just talk about your this apprenticeship. Who's aware of George Zachary's apprenticeship? Okay, a couple of people. So tell us a little bit about what. Well, let me just set it up. So you recently announced that you're looking for someone to bring in, to train, to teach.
To be a great investor.
To be a great investor.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be 47 in 30 days. And I need, sooner or later I'm going to die. Like all of us in this room are going to die. And CRV's been going since 1970. Started by 6 MIT professors. And I feel a responsibility to keep it going. And some of those people are still around, and they're fantastic people. And so I need to find people who can take over in 10 years.
Yeah.
I'll still be involved, but I still work a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day.
Wow.
And I have 3 young kids, and I like spending time with them. And the older I get, the more of my friends that seem to die, unfortunately. I mentioned Elon's co-founder died from a horrible thing. Aortic dissection. His aorta came apart, and he just died.
Oh, my goodness.
This is 3 weeks ago. Left his wife and 7-year-old. And I have no idea how many days I have left. All I know is every day above ground is a good day.
Sure.
A very good one. So I have to find someone great who I believe that, I want to believe that they are focused on building companies that can change people's lives, people who are focused on building businesses that can build economies. My belief is that the only people who produce any economic gain and any real innovation are founders. It is not the government. It is not political parties. It is not venture capitalists like me. Innovation comes from founders. That's where it comes from. And I want to find someone who believes in that and believes in using intuition and believes not in trying to extract every last cent or dime out of a company. That's not the purpose. If you do this job great, you make a ton of money. A ton of money.
Yeah.
I never believed I would ever make this amount of money. I still don't believe it. Like, I check my bank balance and I'm like, is it really in there? It's a freaky feeling. It's a freaky feeling. So I want to find someone, they're motivated to make some money, but I want to find someone who loves founders, loves startups, and at the end of the day will always back and support the founders, even if they disagree with their decisions. Like, one of the things I'm known for in my companies, like if you ask David Sachs, David tweeted out after we were acquired that without me, Yammer may have died. What David really told me is, without you, Yammer would have died. And I told David along the way, I will always support every decision you make. I may not agree with it, and I will tell you when I disagree with it, but I will always support it. I want to find an investor who believes in that. Not someone who's focused on control or liquidation preferences or any of these other ridiculous things to try to make money, because none of those things actually make any sizable returns. And if you look at the venture business, there's 800 firms, 300 that are still active. Of those 300, 30 are profitable over 10 years. 30 out of 300. And there's a top 10. We are in the top 10 by performance. You may not know it because we don't have the biggest brand name, but very few firms make money.
Yeah.
And we have to find people who believe in going after big concepts that can basically be big and change the world, or be big, interesting businesses, or not people who are just trying to create IRR.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for someone like that, and some great people applied there. The way the idea popped up in TechCrunch is Ned Desmond from TechCrunch said, hey, do you want to sponsor TechCrunch? Because we usually have sponsored TechCrunch Disrupt. And I said, well, I don't really want to sponsor the hackathon or anything. And he's like, what's your biggest problem now? I'm like, I'm trying to find someone great who I can basically help train and learn and coach to be awesome as an investor, not in a Sith Star Wars kind of way.
Sure. More like in a the Donald kind of way, right?
Not that way.
Oh,
either.
not that way. My bad. No.
No.
Could be a good show, though, right? I mean, you could probably get on.
It might be, but I don't really care about that.
Well, be fun for us, anyways.
Yeah. So Ned said, "Hey, we'll ghostwrite a post for you," which they did.
Yeah.
And it was not in my pure tone. I felt a little embarrassed reading it, but it had the basic ideas there. I want to find someone who acts out of intuition, who wants to build something big, and about 200 people applied.
Wow.
Some of the videos were quite
Yeah,
hilarious.
I watched a bunch of them today. They were
you
great.
saw some?
Yeah, there's a lot of videos.
There are a lot, and people emailed
lot of passion
me a lot of them.
and a lot of passion.
People
Some of
emailed.
those.
A lot of people emailed me.
Shutterfly kind of passion, some of them.
Yeah, there were some odd videos too. So that's why I'm looking for someone, and
so
it's a partner track job.
At TechCrunch Disrupt, which is happening next week, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, you're going to interview on stage.
Yeah,
some of the best
5 to 8
candidates.
of the people.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So
and,
can you
and,
still
and it's
apply?
not assured that one of those people is going to get the job.
Sure.
But my number one job the next 6 months is to find this person.
Right.
Above everything else I'm doing.
Very cool. Has anyone in here applied for it? Okay, awesome. Good for you guys. Is it too late to apply? Is it closed?
As of tonight it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So go home and do
TechCrunch
it.
already sent out some of the
finalists.
invites, not all of them yet.
Okay. Can we give a big round of applause
Thank
for
you.
George? Thank you very much. Let's take a couple of questions. I'm gonna just squeeze over here. If you've got a question, try and not get too much feedback here on the mic. If you want to ask a question your way, then do it from way on the other side of the room there. See if you can come over here. We'll get you on film here. Go ahead. You want to start, Thomas?
Yeah, I just want to say, someone of such incredible accomplishments, and the fact that he deals with some of the titans of industry, so to speak. I just think you're such a great, humble guy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I thank my parents for that.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Shannon Clark. I actually am one of the people who applied. But I have a question for you. In your conversation, you focused primarily on individual founders. What do you think is the right size of a founding team? Is it a single founder? Is it a pair? Is it 3 or 4? What's the right size that you look for?
About 1 to 3. I've had bad outcomes when there's like a founding team of 5 or 6, and one of the problems is that people don't know who's in charge and who's leading. There's like a leadership problem. The biggest problem in startups is not management, it's actually leadership. And a lot of investors tend to fire bad management. In startups, that's the mistake. You have to focus on who are the leaders. You want like Steve Jobs wasn't a great manager ever, but he hired great managers, but you need a leader. So it's easier to find a leader in 1 to 3 people than when you have 5 or 6 people who are all equal. That distorts who's running what.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hey, Marcy. Marcy was one of the founders of Critical Path that I backed in March of 1998. That went public in March of 1999. And it was a great economic outcome for our firm. And I actually had to fire the CEO there because of a legal issue of breaking SEC rules. That was not fun. Not fun.
Was Marcy? She wasn't the CEO.
No, Marcy was not the CEO.
No. George, I'm just curious, what's your growing edge? What are you learning
What's my
now?
what?
What's your growing edge?
My growing edge?
Yeah, what are you learning? Like, you've been doing this for a really, really long time.
It feels like I'm learning something new every day, which is a great feeling. I think the most interesting part right now for me is continuing to focus not just on my intuition, but combining that with, like, for example, if someone had showed me Airbnb, I would have turned it down. Why? Because I don't like staying at other people's houses and sleeping on couches anymore, even though I used to. And I don't want other people sleeping on my couches in my house. That's why I wanted to make some money. So I wouldn't have invested, but what I've learned is that it's not necessarily whether I would use the service, is looking at metrics and seeing, do other people like using it? Is there value in that? And you know, sometimes, so combining that with my intuition about the people, the founders. So that's kind of my edge of thinking.
Thank you.
Sure. And you can ask me any questions you want.
Hi, George. My name
Yes.
is Meyer. I have a question about funding, early stage funding. Recently, there's been debate about convertible debt, and the Founders Institute just released something about convertible equity.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, like, is there a preference why convertible equity now? Because it felt like a couple months back, everybody was like, convertible debt's just the way to go. And then recently, AngelList has released their docs platform to allow, quick funding for angel investments. So just a little input on those things.
Yeah, I think the AngelList innovation is fantastic. I mean, the docs to do simple seed fundings should be automated. There's no complicated process by it. I think it's fantastic. The convertible debt equity thing, the best model you can have is to price your equity, keeps everyone aligned. As a seed investor, I've never had a preference. As a founder, if I was going to do it myself, I would definitely price the equity. It's the cleanest process by far. Because when you do convertible debt, your investors don't necessarily have the same alignment with you as a founder to try to create value. Then there's the quote unquote a cap on convertible debt, which is, so it's basically the upside, you have the downside of equity, downside of debt with not much of the upside of equity when you do convertible debt with a cap. It makes no sense to me. It became part of the marketing war. I mean, we used it too and trying to differentiate capital. But by far the cleanest system is just to price it as a percent of equity. These are all, this is just really an irregularity caused by the fact that the legal fees to actually close equity docs is too high. Because if they were low, people would just, and fast, people would just do equity docs.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, George. My name's James Colgan. Really appreciated the anecdotes around how various different amazing startups got started. And it led me to the impression that, over a couple of beers with a good idea, you can kind of invest in something, but I'm sure there's a continuum to your investing. So percentage-wise, I'm guessing, if you know the founder, you've got experience with them, they come up with a great idea like Elon Musk, I'm in.
Yeah.
Going on intuition, how prepared does the entrepreneur need to be? Is it a bright idea with a bright guy? There's a lot of space there.
Yeah, wow, that's a hard question to answer. I'll give you an example. A guy named Sebastian Thrun, who was a professor at Stanford and who ran Google X, put together an AI course online. He got 160,000 students on his AI course. I've known Sebastian since he was at Stanford. And he says, hey, I'm thinking about funding the company, but I'm not sure anyone wants to give me money to do this. He goes, what do you think of it? I said, I think this is awesome. In 15 minutes, I wrote him a check for $5 million. And that was back in January. We have a lot more classes on Udacity. We don't have that many classes, but our goal is basically to be, I'm the first person in my family tree to go to college ever. And I would like other people to have that opportunity because no one else in my family tree did. So I would, so we've gotten thousands of emails from users saying, this has changed my life. people from all over the world who said, this has changed my life. So like, I love what they're doing, and I learned a lot about how universities work. They're like more bureaucratic than the government, which is hard to believe. And I just think education is a great place to innovate and probably will be a great business. So I just had a gut feeling about it, and I wrote a check for $5 million after 15 minutes, but that's not the norm, I would say. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I've only been here a month. I've moved here from Canada. So I've been attending a lot of these events and listening to an array of opinions. And what you've said today resonated with me on certain levels, but they talk about the emotion and the passion that you have to have behind your idea. However, it seems that it's like, well, don't be too emotional about it, and don't be too passionate about it, and don't be too in love with your idea. But yet what you've conveyed tonight seems to sort of contradict that. Is there a balance between, as a founder, you're passionate about it, but also between conveying that there's also a business behind it? And
Well,
is there one?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, when you present to an investor, you want to find an investor who's kind of matches your own style. Like if they're if there's someone that makes just decisions off of numbers and rationality, and you make it off of gut or emotions, it probably will be a difficult relationship, is my guess, unless everything's going perfect and then everyone's happy, which never happens. You know, for me, I like to see the raw person and what they think. I like that. I'd rather have someone be open and raw and direct about it than kind of calculated. But that's kind of what I like. And I think finding, you know, when you go to reach out to investors, you are looking for money, but you're looking for people who have your same style. Everyone who you invite and involve early on in the company has a disproportionate amount of influence on the success or failure, because they affect your mood and your desire to interact with them. So you should find people who you have great chemistry with. That's what I would say. But who cares if they don't like your style?
Hi, George.
Hi.
I have a startup that I want to pitch to you, and I obviously recently read that you get 50 pitches a day, and 25 of which are recommended by friends.
Realistically, about 20 a day.
Okay, and half of those are recommended by your friends?
About 5.
Okay, so what is it that you're looking for a pitch that stands out, or I'm basically looking for what do I have to do to stand out, my pitch to stand out?
Oh, wow, this is like the central, like out of, very few pitches stand out. What I'm looking for, which I'm not sure everyone else is looking for, is I'm looking for a clear idea, even if it sounds completely crazy. I'm looking for a clear, big idea. I'm looking for founders who have some background or something about them that's coherent with their idea, where basically they are living out their idea, which is an extension of them. They didn't read in the IDC reports that, you know, the market for CRM on iPad is blah, blah, blah. So they're living the idea. They're not living the passion of making a lot of money. They're living this idea, and they have to do this. Like Jack lived it out with Twitter. It's Jack. It wasn't like he saw someone else doing it. So I hope that helps. I would just say, just be direct and authentic, and sending a short deck, like 5 to 8 slides about who you are as founders, what the basic idea is, and what's defensible. The other thing that I've learned is that about myself is, this is something really important, which I might spend a couple minutes on right now, is everyone talks about they're looking for something disruptive. But I actually don't think people are really looking for something disruptive. I think everyone's looking to be a monopolist. Everyone. And so what I look for, disruption is a tactic to become a monopolist. So let me give you an example. When airlines first came out, people said they were incredibly disruptive to railroads and it was going to destroy the railroad business. If you look at the airline business now and the railroad business now, the railroad business, the biggest company is Union Pacific. They have a $58 billion market cap and $19 billion of sales. The airline industry has $155 billion of sales and $30 billion of market cap. So what you see is that the airline business, while it was disruptive, sucks. Union Pacific isn't in the railroad business, they're in the railroad tracks business. So they own and control an asset because people don't make more real estate to put more tracks on. So what I look for is a tendency of founders to show how that as they scale the business up, they get disproportionate economics and margins. Like in the companies that I work on, if they're successful, sooner or later, the DOJ and the FTC is going to want to try to regulate and control them. Those are the kinds of companies I want to be investors in, because it means they gain power. And as you gain power, as you increase scale, you can be more tolerant of screw-ups in the company, both people and operating mistakes. So that's kind of what I look for. I'm not interested in commodity businesses. I'm looking for businesses that can become a monopoly because of their natural product market fit. It sounds a little evil, but that's kind of what I look for.
Let's give George another big round of applause.
Thank you.